He bought Tom Cruise's abandoned mansion for $73,000, thinking he'd found a fixer-upper with a Hollywood pedigree. But when an injured veteran named Marcus discovered the hidden panic room sealed behind a library wall, what he found inside wasn't just money, it was $260 million in cash, gold, and secrets that would explain why one of the world's biggest stars vanished from his own home and never looked back. Before we dive into the story, make sure to smash subscribe because tomorrow we have an extra special story for you that will blow your mind. The morning sun barely cut through the Los Angeles smog as Marcus Riley sat in his cramped studio apartment in Reseda, staring at his laptop screen with the kind of desperation that comes from being 34 years old with a body that felt 70. His right leg, the one with the titanium rod from Kandahar, throbbed with its usual morning greeting. A dull, persistent ache that started at his knee and radiated upward like someone was driving hot nails through his femur. 3 years since the IED. 3 years since his life split cleanly into before and after, like a tree struck by lightning. The army had given him medals. A Purple Heart sat in a box somewhere in his closet, buried under old t-shirts he couldn't bring himself to throw away. They'd given him a discharge, honorable but final. They'd given him physical therapy, 18 months of it, watching therapists who meant well try to rebuild a leg that would never be what it was. And they'd given him a monthly disability check that barely covered rent in one of the cheapest neighborhoods in Los Angeles, where the walls were thin enough to hear your neighbor's arguments and the parking lot smelled like old fryer oil from the taco stand next door. What they couldn't give him back was the person he used to be. Marcus had been a helicopter mechanic, one of the best in his unit. He could diagnose an engine problem by sound alone, just by listening to the particular whine of a rotor or the subtle change in pitch when a bearing was going bad. He could rebuild a transmission blindfolded, had done it once on a bet, laughing the whole time while his buddies watched in amazement. He'd been confident then, strong, certain of his place in the world. Now his hands shook sometimes, usually when he least expected it. The tremors would start in his fingers and spread up his arms like electrical currents misfiring. And the loud sounds, God, the loud sounds. A car backfiring could send him diving for cover before his brain caught up with reality, before the rational part of his mind could explain that he wasn't in Afghanistan anymore, that the war was over, that he was safe. PTSD, the doctors called it. Marcus called it hell. Called it living in 2 worlds at once, never quite sure which one was real. He'd tried to rebuild his life. Had gotten a job at a local garage in North Hollywood, working on civilian vehicles. It had felt good at first, using his skills again, feeling useful. But then came the day a Honda Civic backfired while he was underneath it, and Marcus had rolled out screaming, scrambling for cover behind a tool chest, his heart hammering so hard he thought it might explode. The other mechanics had stared. The owner, a guy named Frank who'd seemed sympathetic at first, had pulled him aside an hour later. Too unreliable, Frank had said, not meeting Marcus's eyes. Not his fault, Frank had added quickly. But business was business. Customers didn't want to see that kind of thing. Marcus hadn't argued, hadn't fought, just packed up his tools and left. Now he survived on side jobs, fixed neighbors' cars in the alley behind his building, charging $50 for an oil change when the shop down the street charged $90. Patched together just enough money to eat ramen and peanut butter sandwiches, to pay rent, to keep the lights on. Trying to figure out what came next, if anything came next at all. Some days he wasn't sure there was a next. Some days felt like the end credits had already rolled and he was just too stubborn to leave the theater. That morning he'd been scrolling through property auction sites. It was a habit he'd developed after reading some self-help book his VA therapist had recommended, something about manifesting your dreams and visualizing success. Marcus didn't really believe in that stuff, but looking at houses gave him something to do besides stare at the ceiling and count the water stains. He couldn't afford to buy anything, not even close, but he liked to imagine. Liked to picture a workshop of his own, a place with good lighting and clean floors and tools organized on pegboards. A place where he could work at his own pace, where nobody would judge him if he needed to step outside and breathe when the anxiety got too bad. A place where he could build something with his hands again, create something good instead of just surviving. That's when he saw it. The listing was buried deep in the foreclosure section, past the bank-owned condos and the properties seized for back taxes. Hollywood Hills Estate, the headline read. Formerly owned by prominent actor. 30 rooms, 5 acres. Significant structural issues. Sold as is. Minimum bid $70,000. No reserve, no photos. Just an address on Skyline Drive. Marcus's finger hovered over the mousepad. $70,000 for a Hollywood Hills mansion? Something was very wrong. He'd lived in Los Angeles long enough to know that properties up in those hills didn't go for less than $5 million. Even teardowns on small lots commanded millions just for the land. This had to be a mistake, a typo. Or maybe the place was literally falling into the hillside. He clicked through to the auction details, his curiosity overriding his common sense. The property description was sparse, almost deliberately vague. Built in 1973, last occupied in 2015. Abandoned by owner, multiple code violations, unpaid property taxes exceeding $400,000, buyer responsible for all liens and encumbrances. County makes no representations as to condition or habitability. Then he got to the disclosure section, and his stomach tightened. Previous owner, Thomas Mapother IV. Marcus sat back in his creaking office chair, the name processing slowly. Thomas Mapother. He Googled it, though part of him already knew. Thomas Cruz Mapother IV. Tom Cruise's real name. The listing was using his legal name, probably for privacy reasons, but there was no mistaking it. This was Tom Cruise's house. Tom Cruise had owned this property and he'd walked away from it, just left it. Abandoned it completely without explanation. That didn't make sense. None of it made sense. Tom Cruise was worth hundreds of millions of dollars, maybe close to $1 billion. Why would he walk away from a mansion in the Hollywood Hills? Why would he let it go into foreclosure over $400,000 in back taxes, an amount that was probably less than he spent on his private jet fuel in a year? Marcus spent the next 3 hours falling down a rabbit hole of internet searches. He started with news articles, then moved to celebrity gossip sites, then to the darker corners of message boards where conspiracy theorists gathered like moths around a flame. The story was always the same, always maddeningly incomplete. In late 2015, Tom Cruise had suddenly stopped visiting his Hollywood Hills property. No explanation, no announcement. His representatives had issued a brief statement claiming he'd decided to consolidate his real estate holdings, that he was focusing on his homes in Colorado and Florida. But the Hollywood house had never been sold, never been listed. It had just been left there, doors locked, utilities eventually shut off, slowly dying from neglect. Some forums claimed the house was cursed. A poster with the username Hollywood Insider claimed a crew member from one of Cruise's movies had died there during a party, and Cruise had refused to set foot on the property afterward. Another thread insisted the house was built on an ancient Native American burial ground and that strange things had always happened there. Lights turning on and off, doors opening by themselves, voices in empty rooms. The conspiracy theories got wilder from there. Secret society meetings gone wrong, alien encounters, government surveillance. One particularly detailed post claimed the house had been used for classified meetings related to Scientology leadership, and that something had happened there, something so disturbing that even Cruise's handlers couldn't spin it. The poster had been vague about details, probably, Marcus thought, because there were no details. Just speculation and paranoia feeding on itself. Marcus didn't believe in curses. Didn't believe in ghosts or aliens or secret societies running the world from mansion basements. He'd seen real evil in Afghanistan, the kind of evil that came from human decisions and human cruelty, and it had never needed supernatural explanations. But he did believe in opportunities, and he believed in desperation, which was what he felt looking at his bank account balance, $17,342. Money he'd been hoarding for years, skipping meals, avoiding the doctor even when his legs screamed at him, just saving every penny he could for the inevitable disaster that seemed always one step behind him. $70,000. He'd need to borrow the rest, but it was possible, technically possible. He could get a hard money loan if he used his truck as collateral. The truck was the only thing he owned outright, a 2008 Ford F-150 with 200,000 miles on it, but still running strong because Marcus had rebuilt half the engine himself. It was insane, completely insane. A house that a millionaire had abandoned, that nobody else apparently wanted to buy, that probably had foundation issues or mold or structural damage that would cost millions to fix. Every rational bone in his body screamed that this was a trap, a money pit, a disaster waiting to happen. He'd be throwing away his entire savings plus going into debt for a property that might be literally uninhabitable. But Marcus had learned something in Afghanistan, learned it on the day the IED went off and he'd seen his friends torn apart. He'd learned that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is play it safe. Sometimes staying in the vehicle means dying slowly. Sometimes you have to charge forward into the unknown because the known path leads nowhere good. Sometimes you have to take the risk because not taking it means accepting that this cramped studio apartment with the water-stained ceiling and the smell of old grease is all your life will ever be. He picked up his phone. The loan came from a man named Vincent, who operated out of a pawn shop in Van Nuys. Marcus had heard about him from another veteran, a guy named Danny, who'd needed fast cash for his wife's medical bills. Vincent was the kind of lender you went to when banks wouldn't touch you, when your credit was shot and your income was disability checks and under-the-table car repairs. The kind of man who charged interest rates that would make a credit card company blush. The pawn shop was sandwiched between a laundromat and a liquor store with bars on the windows. Marcus pushed through the door, and a bell chimed above his head. The interior was dim, crowded with the detritus of desperate lives. Guitars, televisions, jewelry, power tools, everything someone had once valued enough to buy and later needed to sell just to survive. Vincent sat behind a glass counter filled with watches and rings, a heavy-set man in his 50s with thinning hair and the flat, appraising eyes of someone who'd seen every hard luck story and stopped being moved by them years ago. "Help you?" Vincent asked without looking up from the phone he was scrolling through. "Danny Morris sent me," Marcus said. "Said you might be able to help with a loan." That got Vincent's attention. He set down the phone and really looked at Marcus for the first time, taking in the limp, the threadbare jacket, the military bearing that never quite went away no matter how much time passed. "Danny. Yeah, I know Danny. How much you need?" $53,000. Vincent's eyebrows climbed toward his receding hairline. He let out a short bark of laughter. "You want me to loan you 53 grand? What's the collateral? You got a house? Car?" 2008 F-150, paid off, clean title. "And what do you need 53,000 for? Medical bills? Business loan?" Marcus hesitated, then figured there was no point in lying. "To buy a house at auction." Vincent stared at him for a long moment. Then he laughed again, longer this time. "You want me to loan you $53,000 so you can buy a house you've never seen? What house is worth that little?" Tom Cruise's abandoned mansion in the Hollywood Hills. The laughter died. Vincent leaned forward. "The one on Skyline Drive? You know it? Everyone knows it. Been sitting empty for years. My cousin's a real estate agent, says the place is cursed, says nobody will touch it." I'm not afraid of curses. Vincent studied him for a long moment. You military? Army. Helicopter mechanic. Medically discharged 3 years ago. Sea combat? 3 tours. Afghanistan. Vincent nodded slowly. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite sympathy, but something adjacent to it. Recognition, maybe, of someone who'd been chewed up and spit out by forces beyond their control. All right, I'll give you the loan, 25% interest. I want the title to your truck. And if you miss a payment, I take everything. The truck, whatever you can get for that mansion. All of it. We clear? 25%. Marcus did the quick math in his head. He'd owe over $66,000. If he couldn't flip the property fast, couldn't sell it within 90 days, he'd be completely destroyed. No truck, no savings, nothing. We're clear, he said. He signed the papers with shaking hands. The auction was held 3 days later in a county administration building downtown, one of those government structures that looked like it had been designed to crush the human spirit. Gray concrete, fluorescent lighting that turned everyone's skin the color of old newspapers. Folding chairs arranged in rows facing a folding table where a bored-looking woman in a gray suit shuffled papers and occasionally glanced at her phone. Marcus arrived 20 minutes early. He'd worn the cleanest clothes he owned, a button-down shirt he'd ironed himself and slacks he'd bought at Goodwill. He wanted to look like someone who belonged, someone who had the money and confidence to buy property. Instead, he felt like a fraud, like everyone in the room could see right through him to the broke veteran underneath, the guy who was betting his entire life on a house he'd never seen. There were only 4 other people in the room. An elderly woman with too much jewelry and a Chanel handbag that probably cost more than Marcus's truck. A man in an expensive suit, mid-40s, with styled hair and a Rolex that caught the fluorescent light. A younger couple, maybe late 20s, dressed in casual clothes and whispering to each other nervously. And a man in the back row, older, weathered, wearing a maintenance worker's uniform and watching everyone with sharp, calculating eyes. At exactly 10 o'clock, the auctioneer cleared her throat. Good morning. We'll now begin the county auction for delinquent properties. Please note that all sales are final. All properties are sold as is, with no warranties or representations, and buyers are responsible for all liens, encumbrances, and unpaid taxes. Do all participants understand and agree? Murmurs of agreement. She consulted her papers. Lot 47. Property located at 1329 Skyline Drive, Hollywood Hills. 30 rooms, 5.2 acres. Previous owner Thomas Mapother IV. Property has been abandoned since 2015. Buyer assumes all code violations and outstanding liens. Opening bid $70,000. Marcus raised his hand, his heart hammering so hard he could hear it in his ears. The auctioneer nodded at him. $70,000 from bidder 307. The room went completely silent. Marcus waited for someone else to bid. The man in the expensive suit was staring at him with something like disbelief. The elderly woman shook her head slowly, the gesture somehow conveying both pity and judgment. The young couple whispered more urgently to each other, the woman pulling out her phone to Google something. The auctioneer waited the required 30 seconds. Going once. Nobody moved. Going twice. The man in the expensive suit opened his mouth like he was going to say something, then closed it and looked away. Sold to bidder 307 for $70,000. That was it. The whole thing took 90 seconds. Marcus walked out of the building 20 minutes later, after signing what felt like 100 documents, holding a deed to a property that was supposedly worth millions. His hands were still shaking, his leg was throbbing from sitting too long in the uncomfortable folding chair, and he felt like he'd either just saved his life or destroyed it completely. As he limped toward his truck in the parking lot, a voice called out behind him. Hey, "Hey, wait up!" Marcus turned. It was the man in the maintenance uniform, jogging to catch up despite looking like he was pushing 65. "You the guy who just bought the cruise place?" the man asked, breathing hard. "Yeah." "You been there? Seen it?" "Not yet. Going there now." The man looked at him with genuine concern. "Listen, I don't know you, but I gotta tell you something. I worked security up in those hills for 20 years, watched a lot of houses. That one?" He gestured vaguely toward the north. "Something's wrong with it. I can't tell you what because I don't know. But I've seen people go in there, maintenance crews, inspectors, and they come out looking like they've seen a ghost. Half of them refuse to go back. The county sent a team to assess it last year, and only one guy would go inside. Said he felt like he was being watched the whole time." Marcus studied the man's face. He looked sincere, not crazy, not trying to scare him for fun, just someone offering a genuine warning. "I appreciate that," Marcus said. "But I'm all in now. Already bought it." The man nodded slowly. "Yeah, I figured. Just wanted you to know what you're walking into. Be careful in there. And if you feel like something's off, trust your gut and get out." He walked away before Marcus could respond. Marcus sat in his truck for a long time, the deed on the passenger seat, the man's warning echoing in his head. Then he started the engine and headed north toward the Hollywood Hills. The drive took 45 minutes through traffic that seemed designed to test his patience. By the time he turned onto Skyline Drive, his leg was screaming from working the clutch, and his nerves were frayed to the point of breaking. The street was narrow, winding, climbing steeply into the hills where the houses hid behind high walls and dense vegetation. This was old money. Real money. The kind of neighborhood where people had security gates and privacy hedges and didn't acknowledge the existence of anyone who didn't belong. The address led him to a massive iron gate, 12 feet tall, painted black but now showing rust along the bottom edge where moisture had eaten through the paint. The call box hung off its post, wires exposed and dangling. Someone had spray-painted something in faded red letters on one of the gate pillars, but it was too worn to read. Marcus got out of his truck and approached the gate. It wasn't fully closed, just resting in a partially open position like someone had driven through and never bothered to shut it behind them. He pushed, and it swung inward with a groan of protesting hinges. The driveway curved upward through what had once been landscaped grounds but was now a jungle of overgrown plants. Vines had consumed the security cameras mounted on poles. Bougainvillea had run wild, covering sections of the driveway with thorny branches. Fallen palm fronds littered the pavement. Trees Marcus couldn't identify grew in thick clusters, their branches forming a canopy overhead that blocked out much of the sunlight. It felt like driving through a tunnel, a green living tunnel that seemed to close in behind him as he ascended. Then the house came into view and Marcus's breath caught in his throat. It was massive. Mediterranean-style architecture, cream-colored stone that might have once been pristine but was now stained with dirt and water damage. 3 stories tall with a red tile roof, some of the tiles missing or broken. Grand archways and balconies with wrought iron railings. Tall windows, many of them broken, others intact but so dirty they were opaque. A circular driveway with a fountain in the center, long since dried up, now filled with dead leaves, bird nests, and debris. But despite the neglect, despite the broken windows and the graffiti someone had spray-painted on the garage doors, despite the general air of abandonment and decay, the house was stunning. The bones were incredible. The architecture was elegant. The proportions were perfect. This had been, once upon a time, someone's dream home. A masterpiece. Marcus parked in the circular driveway and stepped out slowly, his bad leg protesting as he put weight on it. He stood there for a long moment, staring up at the mansion, trying to process that he owned this. He actually owned this. It felt surreal, impossible, like he'd stepped through a looking glass into someone else's life. The front door was unlocked. Of course it was. Who would bother locking an abandoned house? Who would bother stealing from a place everyone thought was cursed? Marcus pushed the door open, and the hinges screamed in protest, the sound echoing through the interior like an alarm announcing his arrival. He stepped inside. The foyer took his breath away. It was 2 stories tall, with a grand staircase sweeping upward on both sides, meeting at a landing on the 2nd floor. Crystal chandeliers hung overhead, dusty and cobwebbed, but still somehow magnificent. Marble floors stretched in every direction, cracked in places but still beautiful. To his left, through an archway, he could see a formal living room with floor-to-ceiling windows that would have offered stunning views of Los Angeles if they weren't so dirty. To his right, a dining room with a table long enough to seat 20 people. Everything was covered in dust, thick, undisturbed dust that suggested nobody had been inside in years, but the furniture was still there, covered in debris, draped with cobwebs, but there. Personal items still sat on shelves, books lined the walls, photos in frames too dirty to see clearly, knickknacks and decorations. It was like the Marie Celeste, like everyone had been raptured mid-dinner party, leaving everything behind in perfect frozen stillness. Marcus walked through the house slowly, his footsteps echoing on the marble floors, each sound seeming too loud in the oppressive silence. He found the kitchen, a massive commercial-grade space with top-of-the-line appliances from maybe 8 or 10 years ago. Sub-Zero refrigerator, Viking range with 8 burners, 2 dishwashers, a prep island big enough to butcher a cow, all of it covered in dust and cobwebs, but underneath still gleaming stainless steel. The master bedroom suite was on the 2nd floor, and it was bigger than Marcus's entire apartment, bigger than 3 of his apartments. A king-sized bed sat in the center, the mattress sagging and stained, the bedding long since ruined by time and moisture. Walk-in closets, 2 of them, one on each side of the room. The bathroom had a jacuzzi tub large enough to swim in, double vanities, a shower with what looked like 16 different heads, and everything still in place, like the owner had just stepped out for a moment and would be back any second. Marcus spent hours exploring. He found a home theater with rows of plush seating, the screen cracked but still intact, a gym with equipment still in place, weights on the racks, a treadmill facing a wall of mirrors. A wine cellar in the basement, accessed through a door off the kitchen, still holding hundreds of bottles in racks along the walls. An indoor pool, drained now, the tile at the bottom cracked and stained but still showing the intricate mosaic pattern of dolphins and waves. Every room revealed more evidence of abandonment, more signs that someone had walked away from extraordinary wealth without looking back. It didn't make sense. None of it made sense. This wasn't a house you left. This was a house you fought to keep, sacrificed to maintain, treasured like a family heirloom. So why had Tom Cruise left it? As the afternoon wore on and the sun began to slant through the dirty windows at steep angles, Marcus felt the house beginning to change around him. Or maybe it wasn't the house. Maybe it was just his perception shifting, but the shadows seemed darker somehow, the silence felt heavier, and he started noticing things he'd missed on his first pass-through. Doors that had been closed were now open. He was sure of it. He'd walked past a closed door on the 2nd floor hallway, but when he came back 5 minutes later, it was standing wide open, revealing a bathroom beyond. A window in one of the bedrooms had been latched from the inside. He'd checked it specifically, tested the latch. But 10 minutes later, coming back through the same room, the window was open an inch, cold air seeping in. And the sounds. God, the sounds. The house settled and creaked like all old houses do, but these sounds seemed deliberate, rhythmic, like footsteps above him when he was on the 2nd floor, which was impossible because there was nothing above except the attic, and he hadn't seen any stairs leading up there. Marcus told himself it was nothing. Old houses made noise, pipes expanded and contracted, wood shifted, wind moved through broken windows and created drafts that could open unlatched doors, all perfectly normal, all perfectly explainable. But as sunset approached and the light began to fail, he felt something else. A presence. like he wasn't alone. Like something or someone was watching him from the shadows, tracking his movements through the house, waiting for something. He decided to camp in the living room for the night. He'd brought a sleeping bag, some water, granola bars. The original plan had been to sleep in the master bedroom, but something about that room had made him deeply uncomfortable. The way the shadows gathered in the corners, the way the air felt thick and oppressive. He unrolled his sleeping bag on one of the dusty couches and sat down, his back against the armrest, positioning himself so he could see both entrances to the room. His military training kicking in automatically. Never sleep anywhere you can be surprised. Always have an exit route. Always maintain situational awareness. As darkness fell completely and the house disappeared into shadow around him, Marcus heard it. A soft thump, then another, rhythmic, deliberate. Thump, thump, thump. It was coming from deeper in the house, from the east wing, he thought. The part of the house he hadn't fully explored yet because some of the doors had been locked. Hello? His voice echoed through the empty rooms, swallowed by the darkness. No response. Just that sound continuing, steady as a heartbeat. Thump, thump, thump. Marcus grabbed his flashlight from his bag. He also grabbed a tire iron from his truck, had brought it in earlier just in case. He stood up slowly, his bad leg protesting, and moved toward the sound. The flashlight beam cut through the darkness, creating more shadows than it eliminated. Every piece of furniture became a potential hiding place. Every doorway opened onto deeper darkness. He followed the sound through the house, past the dining room, past a library he'd glanced into earlier, down a long hallway lined with closed doors. The thumping grew louder as he walked, more insistent. It seemed to be coming from the last door at the end of the hall. Marcus's hand shook as he reached for the doorknob. The thumping stopped, just stopped completely, like someone had hit a pause button. The silence that followed was somehow worse than the noise. He waited, heart pounding, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool air. Nothing. He opened the door. It was a library. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves on every wall, packed with books. A massive desk in the center of the room, ornate and clearly expensive. Persian rugs on the floor, reading chairs positioned near windows, all of it covered in the same thick dust that covered everything else in the house. Empty, completely empty. Marcus swept his flashlight across the room, looking for anything that could have made that sound. A loose shutter banging against the window, a branch scraping the roof, an animal trapped somewhere in the walls. Nothing. But as his flashlight beam passed across the back wall, across the bookshelves behind the desk, something caught his eye. The dust pattern wasn't quite right. Most of the house had uniform dust coverage, but here, on this particular section of shelving, the dust looked disturbed. Not recently disturbed, but at some point this section had been moved or touched or opened. Marcus stepped closer, running his hand along the wood. There. A seam, almost invisible, nearly hidden by the ornate carving in the woodwork, but definitely there. The bookshelf wasn't attached to the wall. It was in front of something. He pulled on the edge of the shelf. It didn't budge. He pulled harder. Nothing. Then he noticed the book. One book pushed slightly inward compared to all the others around it. A red leather copy of War and Peace on the middle shelf, third section from the left. Marcus pressed it. Click. The entire bookshelf section swung inward with a whisper of well-oiled hinges, moving so smoothly it was clearly designed to do exactly this. Behind it was a steel door, industrial grade, the kind of door you'd see on a bank vault. A keypad was mounted on the wall beside it, its LED display glowing a soft red in the darkness. A panic room. The house had a panic room, and Tom Cruise had left without ever opening it. Marcus stood there in the darkness, staring at the steel door, and he realized with absolute certainty that whatever was behind that door was the reason Tom Cruise had walked away from everything. The reason this mansion worth millions had been abandoned. The reason people whispered about curses and refused to come here. That night, Marcus didn't sleep at all. He sat in the library with his back against the wall, tire iron across his lap, watching that steel door like it might open on its own. The house settled around him with groans and creaks that sounded almost alive. Every sound made him flinch, every shadow seemed to move with purpose, and somewhere deep in his mind a voice whispered that he'd made a terrible mistake, that he should leave now, tonight, while he still could, that some doors were meant to stay closed, that some secrets were better left buried. But Marcus was a veteran. He'd learned a long time ago that the only way out was through, and whatever waited behind that steel door, he was going to have to face it eventually. The question wasn't whether he'd open it. The question was whether he'd survive what he found inside. Marcus woke with a start to sunlight streaming through the dirty library windows, his neck stiff from sleeping against the wall, the tire iron still gripped in his hand like a talisman. For a disoriented moment, he forgot where he was. Then it all came rushing back. The auction, the mansion, the hidden panic room behind the bookshelf. He stood slowly, his bad legs screaming in protest, and looked at the steel door still visible behind the open bookshelf. In daylight, it looked less ominous. Just a door. Just metal and hinges and a keypad. Nothing supernatural. Nothing cursed. Just a rich man's security measure. Marcus made a decision. If he was going to figure out what was behind that door, he needed to understand this house completely. Every room, every closet, every corner. He needed to map it, document it, search it systematically for clues about why Tom Cruise had walked away. Because that panic room wasn't random, it was intentional, and somewhere in these 30 rooms, there had to be answers. He spent the first 2 hours just creating a floor plan. Started at the front door and worked methodically, room by room, sketching rough layouts on paper he'd found in the desk. The ground floor had the grand foyer, the formal living room, the dining room that could seat 20, the commercial kitchen, a breakfast nook with windows overlooking what had once been a garden, a den with built-in bookshelves, a powder room, a laundry room bigger than most bedrooms, and a mudroom leading to the garage. The garage itself held 3 vehicles covered in tarps, shapes Marcus hadn't investigated yet. The second floor was where things got interesting. The master suite took up the entire east wing. But the west wing held 5 more bedrooms, each with its own bathroom, each decorated in a different style like they'd been designed for specific people. One room was clearly meant for a child, though Marcus knew Tom Cruise's kids had never lived here. Painted pale yellow with stars on the ceiling, toys still in a box in the corner. Another room looked like a guest suite for someone important, everything expensive and impersonal. A third had been converted into an office, filing cabinets lining one wall, a desk facing the windows. Marcus started searching that office first. The filing cabinets were locked, but the locks were cheap, the kind you could pick with a paper clip. Inside, he found mostly mundane documents. Property records, insurance papers, receipts for maintenance work done years ago. But in the bottom drawer of the second cabinet, he found something interesting. Architectural drawings. Not the original blueprints, but modifications. Additions made to the house after it was built. He spread them out on the desk, using books as weights to hold down the corners. The drawings were dated 2009, 6 years before Tom Cruise abandoned the property. They showed extensive work being done to the East Wing, specifically to the library and the rooms around it. New walls, reinforced floors. A note in the margin read, "Steel door installation, 12-inch concrete reinforcement, air filtration system, independent power supply." Someone had turned the space beneath the library into a bunker. Not just a panic room, but a serious military-grade shelter. Why? What was Tom Cruise so afraid of that he'd spent what must have been millions creating this hidden fortress inside his home? Marcus took photos of the drawings with his phone, then kept searching. In the closet of another bedroom, behind hanging clothes that smelled of mildew and time, he found something else. A panel in the wall, barely visible, the seam so fine he almost missed it. He pressed on it, and it popped open, revealing a narrow passageway. just wide enough for one person. It led into darkness. Marcus retrieved his flashlight and squeezed into the passage. It ran between the walls, following the house's exterior, then descended via a ladder to the first floor. He found himself emerging in the kitchen pantry, behind shelves of canned goods that had expired years ago. A servant's passage, probably. Old houses like this often had them, ways for staff to move through the house without being seen by guests. But why was it hidden behind a panel? Why not just a regular door? He spent the next 3 hours finding more passages. One connected the master bedroom to what looked like a safe room, windowless and plain, with reinforced walls and a door that locked from the inside. Another passage ran from the garage to the basement, probably an escape route. The house was honeycombed with hidden spaces, secret doors, ways to move unseen. It was like Tom Cruise had been preparing for an invasion, or preparing to hide from someone. By afternoon, Marcus was exhausted, hungry, and increasingly unsettled. The house felt different in daylight, less threatening, but the more he learned about its hidden architecture, the more questions he had. He was sitting in the kitchen, eating a granola bar and studying his sketches, when he heard a car coming up the driveway. Marcus moved quickly to the front windows, staying back from the glass so he wouldn't be visible. A small hybrid car pulled into the circular driveway, something economical and sensible. A woman stepped out, mid-30s maybe, dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing jeans and a UCLA sweatshirt. She had a canvas bag slung over her shoulder and was looking up at the mansion with the expression of someone both fascinated and apprehensive. Marcus watched as she approached the front door. She didn't knock. Instead, she pulled out her phone and appeared to be taking photos of the exterior. Then she started walking around the side of the house, photographing windows, the condition of the roof, the graffiti on the garage doors. Marcus made a decision. He opened the front door and called out, "Can I help you?" The woman jumped, nearly dropping her phone. She turned to face him, one hand pressed to her chest. "Jesus, you scared me. I didn't think anyone was here."
"I live here," Marcus said. "Or I own it anyway. Just bought it at auction."
The woman's eyes widened. "You're the one who bought it? You actually went through with it?" "Do I know you?" "No, sorry." She walked back toward the front steps, extending her hand. "Elena Vasquez. I'm a local historian. I write about Hollywood architecture and preservation. I've been documenting this house for years, trying to get it listed as historically significant before it deteriorated completely." Marcus shook her hand. "Marcus Riley. And yeah, I bought it. Why does everyone act like that's insane?" Elena looked at him carefully, seemed to be deciding how much to say. "Can we talk? I have a lot of information about this property, information you should probably know." They sat on the stone steps of the terrace overlooking Los Angeles, the city spread below them hazy with smog and distance. Elena pulled a tablet from her canvas bag and opened a folder filled with documents and photos. "I've been researching this house since 2016, she began. "When Tom Cruise abandoned it, I thought it would make a great article. Celebrity architecture, the hidden homes of Hollywood, that kind of thing. But the more I dug, the stranger it got." She showed Marcus photos of the house in its prime. Pristine landscaping, gleaming windows, cars in the driveway during what looked like parties or events. Cruise bought this property in 1998. Renovated it extensively, lived here off and on for years. Then in 2009 he started making changes, big changes. Construction crews working at all hours, deliveries of materials in unmarked trucks. Neighbors complained about the noise, but nothing ever came of it. "The panic room," Marcus said. Elena looked at him sharply. "You found it?" "Found the door. Haven't opened it yet." She nodded slowly. "In 2014, something happened. I've interviewed 3 different people who worked on the property, and they all tell similar stories. Cruise became paranoid, started talking about security threats, about needing to protect himself. He had the entire property swept for surveillance devices, changed all the locks, fired most of his regular staff and brought in new people, security types. Security from what? Marcus asked. That's the question nobody can answer. But in October of 2015, Cruz visited the property one last time, stayed for maybe 3 hours, and never came back. His lawyers filed paperwork within a week saying he was consolidating his real estate, but he never sold this place, never even tried, just let it sit here and rot. Elena pulled up more documents. I found the property records. He's still paying property taxes on 3 other homes, Colorado, Florida, London. But this one? He let it go into foreclosure. And when you look at the timeline, he walked away right after multiple security incidents in the neighborhood. What kind of incidents? Break-ins at 2 neighboring properties. Nothing taken, just signs of entry. Security footage showed men in dark clothes, professional, knew what they were doing. One homeowner, a movie producer named Richard Klein, filed a police report saying someone had gone through his home office and photographed documents. Another neighbor reported seeing unfamiliar vehicles parked on the street at night, people sitting inside watching houses. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine despite the warm afternoon sun. You think someone was targeting Cruz? I think Cruz believed someone was targeting him. Whether they actually were? Elena shrugged. He's a celebrity. He's connected to Scientology. He's got money and power and probably enemies. Could have been industrial espionage. Could have been tabloid journalists. Could have been nothing, just paranoia. But whatever he believed, it was serious enough that he walked away from millions of dollars in real estate. She closed the tablet and looked at Marcus. There's something else. 3 times in the past 8 years, people have tried to buy this property before it went to auction. Offered to pay the back taxes, buy it outright. The county has a record of the offers, but every time Tom Cruise's lawyers blocked the sale, said the property wasn't available. It was like he wanted it to sit empty but didn't want anyone else to have it. Why? That's what I've been trying to figure out. What's in this house that's worth protecting but not worth coming back for? Marcus thought about the panic room, the steel door, the keypad. Can I show you something? He led her inside, through the dusty foyer, past the grand staircase to the library. The bookshelf was still open, the steel door still visible behind it. Elena stopped in the doorway, staring. I've been in this house twice before, she said quietly. Snuck in through a broken window last year, documented the deterioration for my article. I never saw this. Never even knew it was here. Any idea how to open it? Marcus asked. Elena approached the keypad, examined it closely without touching. Biometric lock. See the scanner beneath the number pad. It's not just a code, it needs a fingerprint too. You'd need Tom Cruise's fingerprint or whoever else was authorized. She paused. Or the master override code, which we don't have. Marcus felt frustration building. He'd spent an entire day searching this house, and he was no closer to answers, just more questions, more mysteries. Elena was studying the library now, walking slowly around the room, running her fingers along the bookshelves. This is interesting. Look at the titles. She pulled a book down, opened it. Empty. It's a hollow prop. She tried another. Same thing. These aren't real books. They're set dressing. Why would you need fake books in a home library? Marcus helped her check. Out of hundreds of books on these shelves, only about 20 were real. The rest were props, beautiful leather-bound spines with nothing inside. What does that mean? It means this room isn't what it appears to be. It's staged, like a movie set. Elena pulled out her phone, took photos. I need to research this more. Can I come back tomorrow? Bring my equipment? Do a proper documentation? Sure, Marcus said. But Elena, if someone was watching this house before, if they tried to break into neighboring properties, could they still be watching now? She met his eyes, and he saw his own fear reflected there. I don't know. But if I were you, I'd be careful. And I'd figure out what's behind that door as fast as possible. Because if someone else is looking for it, they might not wait for you to open it politely. After Elena left, Marcus spent the rest of the afternoon installing basic security measures. He was no expert, but he knew enough from his military training. He wedged doors shut with rubber stops, rigged some of the broken windows with tripwires made from fishing line and empty cans, set up his phone on a dresser facing the driveway, recording on a loop so he'd have footage of anyone approaching. It wasn't much, but it was something. As darkness fell, he found himself back in the master bedroom suite, searching more carefully this time. The walk-in closets were enormous, and most of the clothes were still there. Designer suits, expensive shoes. Tom Cruise's entire wardrobe left behind like he'd shed a skin and walked away. Marcus was checking the pockets of a leather jacket, looking for anything useful, when he heard it. A sound from downstairs, a door closing, soft but distinct. Marcus froze, his heart rate immediately spiking. He grabbed the tire iron from where he'd left it on the bed and moved silently to the bedroom door. Listened. Nothing for 30 seconds. Then footsteps. Deliberate. Someone moving through the first floor, not trying particularly hard to be quiet. His mind raced. Elena had left hours ago. Nobody else should be here. Nobody else knew he was here, unless someone had been watching, waiting for dark. Marcus moved through the second-floor hallway, staying close to the wall where the floorboards were less likely to creak. He could hear the intruder more clearly now. In the kitchen, maybe. Opening cabinets. Searching for something. Marcus found the hidden passage he'd discovered earlier, the one that led from the second floor down to the kitchen pantry. He squeezed inside, descended the ladder in complete darkness, emerged behind the shelves of expired canned goods. Through the gaps between cans he could see into the kitchen. A man stood at the counter using a flashlight to examine papers Marcus had left there, his sketches of the house layout. The man was in his 40s, wearing dark clothes, professional-looking. He moved with confidence, someone comfortable with breaking and entering. He picked up Marcus's notes, photographed them with his phone, then set them back down exactly as he'd found them. Marcus watched, barely breathing. His training kicked in. Don't engage unless you have to. Observe, gather intelligence, figure out what they want. The man finished with the kitchen and moved toward the library. Of course, everyone wanted the library. Everyone wanted what was behind that steel door. Marcus waited until the man was out of sight, then emerged from the pantry. He moved quickly to the front door, locked it from the inside, pocketed the key. Then he went to the garage, locked those doors too, trapping the intruder inside with him. Then Marcus positioned himself at the bottom of the grand staircase, tire iron in hand, and called out, "Looking for something?" The flashlight beam swung toward him immediately, blinding. The man's voice was calm, professional. "This is private property. You're trespassing." "Funny," Marcus said. "I own this property, got the deed and everything. You're the one trespassing." A pause. The flashlight lowered slightly so it wasn't directly in Marcus's eyes. "You're Marcus Riley, the veteran who bought the house at auction. And you are? Someone who's interested in making you an offer, a generous offer, for the property. Not interested in selling. You haven't heard the price. Don't care about the price." Marcus shifted his grip on the tire iron. "Who sent you? Who's interested in this house?" The man didn't answer. Instead, he turned and walked back toward the library. Marcus followed, maintaining distance, ready for anything. His leg was throbbing, adrenaline making it worse instead of better, but he ignored it. Pain was temporary. Information was valuable. In the library, the man was examining the open bookshelf, shining his light on the steel door. "So you found it. Did you open it? Why do you want to know?" "Because what's behind that door is worth a lot of money to certain people. And those people are willing to pay you to walk away. $5 million. Cash. You sign over the deed, forget you were ever here, and you're set for life." Marcus laughed, a short bark of disbelief. "If it's worth $5 million for me to walk away, it's worth a hell of a lot more to stay." The man turned to face him. In the flashlight's glow, Marcus could see his expression was flat, emotionless. "Don't be stupid. This is bigger than you understand. People have died over what's in this house." "Then tell me what it is." "I can't do that." "Then get out!" Marcus raised the tire iron slightly. "Leave now, or I call the police." The man studied him for a long moment, then nodded once, as if Marcus had confirmed something he already suspected. "You're making a mistake, but it's your mistake to make." He walked past Marcus, heading for the front door. Found it locked. Tried the handle. "Really?" "Back door's that way," Marcus said, gesturing with the tire iron. The man walked to the kitchen, tried that door, also locked. His calm demeanor cracked slightly. "You think locking me in here changes anything?" "I think it gives me time to call the police. Breaking and entering, attempted burglary. They tend to take that seriously up here in the nice neighborhoods." The man pulled out his phone, made a call, spoke quietly in a language Marcus didn't recognize, then hung up and looked at Marcus. "Fine, let me out. But this isn't over. My employers aren't going to stop because you're stubborn. Your employers can make an appointment during business hours," Marcus said. He unlocked the kitchen door, stood back as the man walked through, watched as he disappeared into the darkness of the overgrown grounds. Marcus locked the door again, then ran to his phone, grabbed it, pulled up the recording app. The camera facing the driveway had captured everything. A black SUV parked down the street. The man approaching the house. Marcus saved the footage, uploaded it to cloud storage, sent a copy to Elena. Then he texted her, "Someone just broke in, offered me $5 million to walk away. What the hell is in this house?" Her response came 2 minutes later. "Be careful, I'm coming over. Don't open that door until I get there." What happens next will turn this night upside down, reveal a truth nobody expected, and remind us why sometimes the quietest voices carry the most power. Stay tuned to see what happens next. If you're enjoying the story, please like, share, and subscribe for more. Marcus spent the next hour fortifying the house properly. He dragged furniture against doors, found wooden boards in the garage, and nailed them across the most vulnerable windows. Set up more tripwires. His hands were steady now, muscle memory from training taking over. This was combat preparation. This was what he knew how to do. Elena arrived 45 minutes later with 2 other people. She introduced them as she lugged equipment up the front steps. "This is David Martinez, he's an engineer, and this is Sarah Chen." Marcus interrupted. "Actually, can we call you Sarah Morrison? Long story." Sarah shrugged. "Sure. I'm a security consultant. Elena called me, said you might need help." They set up in the library, David examining the steel door with instruments Marcus didn't recognize while Sarah reviewed the footage of the break-in. Elena was cross-referencing property records on her tablet. "The SUV is registered to a shell corporation," Sarah said, looking up from her laptop. 3 layers deep. Whoever sent him doesn't want to be identified." "The lock on this door is serious," David added. "Military-grade biometric security. But look at this." He pointed to something Marcus hadn't noticed. A small panel below the keypad, barely visible. "Maintenance access. Every high-security lock has one, in case the electronics fail or the authorized person is incapacitated." "Can you open it?" Marcus asked. "Maybe, but it'll take time, and we need to talk about what we might find inside. Elena's been telling me about the history of this place. If someone's willing to offer you $5 million to walk away, there's something in there worth 10 times that, maybe more." Elena looked up from her tablet. "I found something. A building permit application from 2009. Tom Cruise hired a company called Sentinel Secure Systems to install a custom safe room. But here's what's interesting. The owner of Sentinel Secure Systems is a man named Raymond Voss. He's a lawyer, high-powered, represents entertainment industry clients, but he's also been linked to some questionable financial dealings. Nothing proven, but rumors. She pulled up a photo on her tablet. Silver-haired man in an expensive suit standing outside a courthouse. Voss specializes in asset protection, offshore accounts, privacy law, the kind of lawyer you hire when you need to hide something valuable. So Cruise hired this guy to build his panic room, Marcus said, and then abandoned it. Why? Maybe he put something inside he couldn't risk retrieving, Sarah suggested. Something incriminating, something dangerous. David had the maintenance panel open now, revealing a complex array of circuits and wires. This is fascinating work. Whoever designed this knew what they were doing, but I think I can bypass the biometric lock. It'll take a few hours, maybe until morning. Marcus made a decision. Do it. I need to know what's behind that door. They worked through the night. David carefully cutting wires, testing circuits, occasionally cursing in Spanish when something didn't work the way he expected. Sarah set up a proper security system using equipment she'd brought, motion sensors covering all approaches to the house. Elena researched, diving deeper into Tom Cruise's business dealings in 2014 and 2015, looking for anything that might explain the abandonment. Around 3 a.m, Elena found something. Look at this. In June of 2014, Tom Cruise was named in a lawsuit. Civil case, sealed records. The plaintiff was a business partner who claimed Cruise had failed to disclose certain financial information. The case was settled out of court 2 months later for an undisclosed amount. But the timing lines up. With what? Marcus asked. With when Cruise started acting paranoid, when he increased security, when he built the panic room. She looked at them. What if he was involved in something illegal? What if he found out his business partners were dirty and he panicked? And hid the evidence in the panic room, Sarah finished. Evidence he couldn't use without incriminating himself. Evidence he couldn't destroy because they'd know. So he just walked away and let it sit here. For 8 years, Marcus said, until I bought the house. David sat back from his work, wiping sweat from his forehead. I think I've got it. One more connection and the door should unlock. Everyone ready? Marcus looked at the steel door, feeling the weight of the moment. Behind that door was the answer to why Tom Cruise had abandoned millions of dollars in real estate. The answer to why someone had broken into his house tonight offering $5 million. The answer to what had been hidden here in darkness for 8 years. Do it, he said. David connected one final wire. The keypad beeped. A mechanical sound came from deep inside the wall, locks disengaging. Then the steel door, 8 years sealed, swung open with a hiss of releasing air pressure. Cool air rushed out, carrying the smell of concrete and metal. Marcus shined his flashlight into the darkness beyond. A staircase led down. At the bottom, he could see the edge of what looked like a large room. Here we go, Marcus whispered. He stepped through the doorway and descended into Tom Cruise's secret. Behind him, Elena, David, and Sarah followed, their flashlights combining to push back the darkness. With each step down, Marcus felt the temperature drop, felt the air pressure change, felt the weight of earth and concrete above them. This wasn't just a panic room. This was a vault, a bunker, a place built to withstand anything. At the bottom of the stairs, motion sensors triggered, and LED strips along the ceiling flickered to life. The room was revealed in sections as the lights came on. 20 feet by 30 feet, concrete walls a foot thick, reinforced steel ceiling. Climate control keeping it at exactly 65 degrees. Air filtration systems humming softly. Independent power supply. This place could support life for weeks, maybe months. But it was what filled the room that made Marcus's breath catch in his throat. made Elena gasp, made David freeze mid-step, made Sarah reach for the gun Marcus didn't know she'd been carrying. The walls were lined with shelves, and on those shelves, stacked floor to ceiling, were bundles of cash, $100 bills wrapped in plastic. More money than Marcus had ever seen in his life, more money than he'd imagined existed in physical form. "Jesus Christ," David whispered. Marcus moved deeper into the room, his flashlight beam dancing across the money. Each bundle was marked with a number and date. And beyond the cash, he could see more. Safety deposit boxes built into the back wall, metal cases stacked on tables, documents, hard drives, evidence. This wasn't just a panic room. It was a treasure vault, a evidence locker, a secret worth killing for. And Marcus Riley, injured veteran, broke mechanic, desperate man, now stood in the middle of it all with no idea what to do next. Behind him, Elena was taking photos, documenting everything. Sarah was on her phone, presumably calling someone. David was just staring, his mouth open. Marcus walked to one of the metal cases, opened it. Gold bars gleamed under the LED lights, 50 of them at least. He opened another case. Documents, bank statements, transaction records, photos of meetings between people Marcus didn't recognize. In the center of the room sat a desk. On that desk, a leather-bound notebook lay open. Marcus approached it slowly, almost afraid to touch it. The handwriting inside was neat, controlled. Tom Cruise's handwriting. The first page read, "If you're reading this, then either I'm dead or I've finally found the courage to deal with what I've hidden. Neither seems likely. I'm too much of a coward." Marcus read on, his heart pounding, and with each sentence the full scope of what he'd stumbled into became clear. This wasn't just money, this wasn't just evidence, this was a nuclear bomb, and he was holding the detonator. Marcus stood in the center of the panic room, slowly turning in a circle, his flashlight beam sweeping across wealth beyond comprehension. The LED strips hummed overhead, casting everything in stark clinical light that made the money look almost unreal, like props on a movie set. But this was real. Every bundle, every bar of gold, every document that could destroy lives. "Someone count this!" Elena whispered, her voice barely audible over the ventilation system. "Someone tell me how much is here!" David moved to the nearest shelf, picked up one of the bundled stacks of hundreds. The plastic wrap crinkled in his hands. "These bundles are marked. This one says $50,000. He scanned the shelf quickly, counting. 20 bundles per shelf, 4 shelves on this wall. That's $4 million right here. Sarah was examining the opposite wall. Same setup here, maybe more. Some of these bundles are marked 100,000. She pulled out her phone, started calculating. If every wall is similar, we're looking at 20 to 30 million in cash, minimum. But Marcus wasn't listening to their calculations. He was staring at the metal cases stacked on the reinforced table in the center of the room. 3 large cases, the kind you'd use to transport valuable cargo. He approached the first one slowly, his boots echoing on the concrete floor. The latches opened with metallic clicks that seemed too loud in the enclosed space. Gold bars, 50 of them stacked in neat rows, each one stamped with serial numbers and purity marks. Marcus had never held a gold bar before. He lifted one carefully, surprised by its weight, 12.4 kilograms according to the stamp, about 27 pounds. He set it back down gently, his hands trembling. "Current gold price is around $1,900 per ounce," David said quietly, coming to stand beside him. "A standard bar is 400 troy ounces. That's $760,000 per bar. 50 bars means 38 million in gold." The second case held something different, stacks of ornate certificates, each one more elaborate than the last. Bearer bonds, the labels read, various denominations from different countries and time periods. Some were decades old. Marcus had heard of bearer bonds but never seen one. Anonymous ownership. Whoever physically held the bond owned it. No names, no records, completely untraceable. These have to be worth millions, Elena said, leaning over his shoulder. Maybe tens of millions. Some of these are from banks that don't even exist anymore. The third case was the most unsettling. Inside, organized in protective sleeves, were items that clearly didn't belong together. A flash drive labeled crypto keys, handled with extreme care. A small notebook filled with what looked like password strings and wallet addresses. Several USB drives, each one labeled with dates and initials Marcus didn't recognize. And beneath all of that, a stack of photographs. Marcus picked up the first photo carefully. It showed a meeting. 4 men in expensive suits sitting around a table in what looked like a private dining room. He recognized one face immediately from Elena's research earlier. Raymond Voss, the lawyer who'd built this panic room. The other faces were unfamiliar, but they had the look of money and power. The kind of men who appeared in Forbes but never gave interviews. The next photo showed a different meeting. Same men, different location. A yacht deck with ocean in the background. Then another photo. An airport tarmac, a private jet, the same faces visible through windows. Someone had been documenting these meetings, creating a record, building evidence. He was photographing his business partners, Sarah said quietly, creating insurance. Marcus set the photos down and picked up the notebook from the case. He opened it carefully and his blood ran cold. Page after page of cryptocurrency wallet addresses, each one followed by a balance. Bitcoin, Ethereum. Others Marcus didn't recognize. The amounts were staggering. The first wallet alone showed a balance of over 300 Bitcoin. At current prices, David had mentioned earlier that Bitcoin was trading around $60,000. Marcus did the quick math. $18 million in a single wallet. Jesus, David breathed, reading over his shoulder. There are 20 wallets listed here. Even if half of them are empty or the keys are wrong, we're talking about another 50 to 100 million in cryptocurrency. Sarah had moved to the back wall where dozens of safety deposit boxes were built into the concrete. She pulled one open, revealing more documents. Bank statements, wire transfer records, each one meticulously organized and labeled. This is a paper trail. Every transaction, every movement of money, all documented. Elena was photographing everything, her camera clicking rapidly. This is evidence of massive financial crimes. Money laundering at minimum, possibly fraud, embezzlement, tax evasion. The scope of this is... She trailed off, unable to find words. Marcus walked to the desk in the corner of the room. The leather-bound notebook sat there waiting, Tom Cruise's handwriting visible on the open page. Marcus sat down in the chair, which was surprisingly comfortable, ergonomically designed for someone spending long hours at this desk. He pulled the notebook closer and began to read from the beginning. The first entry was dated March 4th, 2014. I made a mistake, a terrible, stupid mistake, and I don't know how to fix it. Raymond came to me 6 months ago with what seemed like a legitimate investment opportunity. He represents some offshore firms, he said. Legitimate businesses looking to invest in American real estate and entertainment. They wanted to partner with someone established, someone with a clean reputation. Someone like me. The returns he promised were incredible, but not impossible. 15 to 20% annually, completely legal, completely above board. I brought in my accountants. They reviewed everything. The paperwork looked perfect, so I said yes. I invested $50 million of my own money, and I helped facilitate investments from others, friends, fellow actors, people who trusted my judgment. Marcus turned the page, his heart pounding. That was in August of 2013. For 6 months, everything was perfect. The returns came exactly as promised. My $50 million became $57.5 million. My friends were happy. Raymond was happy. Everyone was making money. Then in February, one of my accountants found something strange. A transaction that didn't match our records. Money moving through one of the accounts in a way that didn't align with the investment structure. We flagged it, asked Raymond about it. He explained it away, said it was a currency exchange issue, just a temporary notation error. But my accountant didn't believe him, started digging deeper. The next entry was dated a week later. The investments are fake, or mostly fake. There are real estate holdings, real businesses, but they're shells. The money isn't being invested, it's being laundered. Raymond and his partners are moving money for criminals, drug cartels, arms dealers, human traffickers, the worst kind of people. And they've been using my reputation, my name, my accounts to make it look legitimate. Every dollar I invested, every dollar my friends invested, it's all mixed with dirty money. Blood money. And if anyone traces it, if any law enforcement agency follows the thread, it leads directly to me. I'd be the fall guy. The famous actor who got greedy and decided to launder money for criminals. No one would believe I didn't know. No one would believe I was just stupid and trusting. Marcus looked up from the notebook. Elena, Sarah, and David had gathered around, reading over his shoulder. The room was completely silent except for the hum of the ventilation system. "Keep reading," Elena whispered. The entries continued, becoming increasingly desperate. March 18th, 2014. I confronted Raymond today, told him I knew what he was really doing, demanded that he unwind everything, return the money, cut me loose from whatever scheme this is. He just smiled. That's what scared me most. He smiled and said, "Tom, you're already in. There's no getting out. Your signature is on 50 different documents. Your accounts have processed over $200 million. If I go down, you go down. We're partners now, whether you like it or not." Then he leaned in close and said, "Besides, it would be such a shame if something happened to your family. Accidents happen. Houses catch fire. Planes crash. It would be terrible, but these things happen." He threatened him, Sarah said quietly. Trapped him, and then threatened him. Marcus continued reading, his hands shaking now. April 2nd, 2014. I can't sleep, can't eat, can't focus on work. Everyone thinks I'm having a breakdown. Maybe I am. But I have a plan. I'm going to take it all. Every dollar that moved through my accounts, I'm going to convert it to cash and gold and bearer bonds. Things that can't be traced. Things that exist outside the banking system. I'm going to hide it somewhere they'll never find it. Then I'll have leverage. I can threaten to expose them if they don't leave me alone. It's dangerous. It's probably insane. But it's all I can think to do. The entries over the next several months detailed the execution of that plan. Tom Cruise systematically withdrawing funds, converting assets, moving money in ways that looked legitimate on paper but were actually stripping hundreds of millions of dollars from the criminal enterprise he'd been trapped in. He hired contractors to build the panic room, paying them in cash to avoid paper trails. He stockpiled the wealth here in this bunker, piece by piece, creating his insurance policy. The entry dated September 26, 2014, made Marcus's blood run cold. Raymond knows. I don't know how, but he knows I've been moving the money. He came to the house today with 2 other men. They searched everywhere, tore apart my office, went through every room. But they didn't find the panic room. The contractors I hired did excellent work. The entrance is invisible unless you know exactly where to look. Raymond was furious. Said I had 48 hours to return what I'd taken or there would be consequences. I told him I didn't know what he was talking about. Denied everything. But he knows. And now I'm terrified. The next entry was the last one, dated October 8, 2015, over a year after the confrontation. I can't do this anymore. I've been living in fear for over a year. They've been watching me, following me. Every time I come to this house, I see their cars parked down the street. Men watching, waiting. I thought the money would give me leverage, but it's just made me a prisoner. I can't use it without exposing myself. Can't give it back without losing the only protection I have. Can't go to the police without admitting what I did. I'm trapped in a nightmare of my own making, so I'm walking away. I'm leaving this house and never coming back. Let them watch an empty building. Let them search forever. The money stays here, hidden, useless to everyone. Maybe someday I'll find the courage to deal with this. Maybe someday I'll figure out how to expose them without destroying myself. But not today. Today, I'm just going to run. If you're reading this, if you somehow found this room and this money, then you're braver than I ever was. Or maybe just more foolish. Either way, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I wasn't strong enough to fix this. I'm sorry I left this mess for someone else to discover. Do what I couldn't. Make it right. Or if you can't, at least make sure it means something. Marcus closed the notebook slowly. His hands were shaking. His leg was throbbing. The full weight of what he'd discovered settled on his shoulders like a physical burden. He looked up at the others, saw his own shock reflected in their faces. $260 million, Elena said quietly. That's what we're looking at, isn't it? Between the cash, the gold, the bonds, the cryptocurrency, that's the total. David nodded slowly. Give or take. Could be more depending on the crypto values and what some of these bonds are worth. And it's all dirty money, Sarah added. Laundered money that belongs to cartels and traffickers. Money people have killed for. Money they're still looking for. Marcus stood up from the desk, nearly fell as his bad leg gave out. He caught himself on the desk edge, breathing hard. The man who broke in tonight, he offered me $5 million to walk away. Now I know why. They know the money is here, Elena said. They've always known it was here. They just couldn't get to it. Couldn't find the panic room. But now you've bought the house. Now you're searching. You're going to find it eventually. So they're trying to pay you off before you do. Except I already found it, Marcus said. Which means they'll escalate, Sarah said grimly. She pulled out her phone. I need to make some calls. We need serious security here, now. But before she could dial, the lights went out, all of them. The LEDs in the panic room, the house above them, everything went dark instantaneously, leaving them in absolute blackness. Marcus's flashlight had died, the battery finally giving out after hours of use. He heard the others fumbling for their phones, their own flashlights. Then they heard it. A sound from above. In the house, multiple footsteps, moving quickly, purposefully, not trying to be quiet anymore. They're here, Sarah whispered. They're in the house! Marcus felt ice water flood his veins. His combat training kicked in immediately. How many exits from this room? Just the stairs, David said, his voice tight with fear. One way in, one way out. The door, Marcus said. Can we close it? Lock it? It's designed to seal from the inside, David confirmed. Steel bolts. They won't be able to get through. Not quickly, anyway. Do it. David ran up the stairs. Marcus heard the heavy door swing closed, heard the mechanical sound of locks engaging. They were sealed inside. Protected, but also trapped. Sarah had her gun out now. Marcus could see it in the glow from her phone. How long can we survive in here? Weeks, if we had to, David said, coming back down the stairs. The air filtration system is independent. There's a water supply. Even some emergency food rations in that cabinet. This room was built to withstand a siege. Good, Marcus said, because that's what we're in now. Above them they could hear the sounds of search. Furniture being moved, doors being kicked open, men shouting to each other in what sounded like Russian. Marcus counted at least 6 different voices, maybe more. This wasn't a simple break-in. This was a raid. A military-style operation to recover the money they knew was here. Elena had her tablet out, somehow still had battery. I'm uploading everything I photographed, sending it to cloud storage. If something happens to us, at least the evidence exists. Smart, Sarah said. She was typing rapidly on her phone. I'm contacting my firm, telling them our location, telling them to notify authorities if we don't check in every hour. Marcus moved to the shelves of money, started taking his own photos with his phone, documenting everything, each bundle, each marking. Then he photographed Tom's notebook, every page, making sure the resolution was high enough to read the handwriting. Above them, the sounds stopped. For several long moments there was only silence. Then a voice called out, echoing through the house. American accent, educated, cultured. "Mr. Riley? I know you can hear me. My name is Raymond Voss. I believe you've been reading my friend Tom's diary." Marcus and the others froze. Voss, the lawyer, the man who'd built this panic room, the man who'd trapped Tom Cruise in a web of money laundering and threats. "I'm impressed you found the room," Voss continued. His voice was coming from the library above them, just on the other side of the steel door. "It took us years of searching, but you managed it in 2 days. Clever, or lucky. Either way, let's be reasonable about this. Open the door. We'll discuss terms. No one needs to get hurt." Marcus looked at Sarah. She shook her head firmly. "Don't respond. Don't engage." "I know you're down there, Mr. Riley," Voss said. "You and your friends. Elena Vasquez, the historian who's been researching this property for years. Sarah Morrison, formerly Sarah Chen, security consultant with some very interesting connections. And David Martinez, engineer. I know all of you. I've been tracking your activities since you arrived here. Did you really think I wouldn't notice when you started poking around?" Elena's face had gone white.
He knows who we are. He's been watching us.
"Of course he has," Sarah said grimly. "He's had 8 years to set up surveillance, cameras in the trees, listening devices, maybe even people in the neighborhood." Marcus moved to the desk, picked up Tom's notebook, and held it up to his phone camera, started recording a video. "My name is Marcus Riley," he said clearly. "I'm in a panic room beneath 1329 Skyline Drive in Hollywood Hills. I've discovered $260 million in cash, gold, and other assets. I've also discovered evidence of massive money laundering involving a lawyer named Raymond Voss. This evidence shows he was moving money for criminal organizations and using Tom Cruise's reputation to make it look legitimate. If anything happens to me or my friends, this video and all the evidence I've photographed will be released to every news organization and law enforcement agency I can find." "Good," Sarah said. "Make copies. Send them to multiple people. Now." Marcus did. Uploaded the video to 3 different cloud services, sent copies to email addresses, his mother, former army buddies, people who would know something was wrong if he disappeared, creating insurance the same way Tom Cruise had tried to. Above them, Voss's voice came again, but the cultured politeness was gone now, replaced by cold menace. "You're making a mistake, Mr. Riley, a very expensive mistake. That money doesn't belong to you. It doesn't even belong to Tom Cruise anymore. It belongs to people who will burn this house to the ground with you inside it, rather than let you keep it." "We need a plan," David whispered. "We can't just sit here." "Yes, we can," Sarah countered. "I sent messages to my firm. They'll notify police. LAPD will be here within 30 minutes. "Assuming Voss doesn't have them paid off," Elena said. "Men like this, they have connections everywhere." Marcus was thinking, his mind racing through tactical possibilities. They were trapped but safe for now. The door would hold, the room had supplies, but eventually they'd have to come out, and when they did, Voss and his men would be waiting, unless— "The vents," Marcus said suddenly. "The air filtration system. Where does it pull air from?" David looked at him, understanding dawning. "Outside. There has to be an exterior intake somewhere on the property, a pipe or duct leading to the surface." "Big enough to crawl through?" "Maybe, if we're desperate enough." They were that desperate. David led them to the back corner of the room where a large grate covered the main ventilation duct. He pulled it off, revealing a square duct about 2 feet by 2 feet. Tight, very tight, but maybe possible. "It'll lead up and out," David said, shining his phone light into the duct. "Probably exits somewhere in the grounds, if we can get to it before they find it." "I'll go first," Marcus said. "Your leg," Elena protested. "You're injured. Let me—" "I'm military," Marcus interrupted. I've crawled through smaller spaces under fire. I know how to move quietly, how to assess threats. If something goes wrong, you need me up there first." Sarah handed him her gun. "You know how to use this?" Marcus took it, checked the chamber, the safety. "Yeah, I know." He pulled himself into the duct, his bad leg screaming in protest. The metal was cold against his hands and knees. He inched forward, every movement creating soft sounds that seemed impossibly loud in the enclosed space. Behind him he could hear the others following, David next, then Elena, then Sarah bringing up the rear. The duct angled upward at a 30-degree slope. Marcus crawled, pushing with his good leg, pulling with his arms. His shoulders scraped the sides. His back pressed against the top. Sweat dripped into his eyes. The beam from his phone light mounted to his chest showed only endless silver metal stretching ahead. Time lost meaning. Could have been 10 minutes. Could have been an hour. His muscles burned. His leg felt like someone was driving spikes through it. But he kept moving because stopping meant dying, meant letting Voss win, meant letting Tom Cruise's cowardice define this story instead of his own courage. Finally, he saw light ahead. Faint. The exit. He crawled faster, ignoring the pain, ignoring the way his hands were bleeding from scraping against metal seams. He reached the grate, pushed against it, locked from the outside. Of course it was. Security feature to prevent someone from entering through the ventilation system. Marcus braced himself, positioned his feet against one wall of the duct and his back against the other. Then he pushed with all his strength against the grate. Once. Twice. On the third push, something gave. The grate tore free with a screech of metal, tumbling into bushes beyond. Marcus scrambled out, falling into thick vegetation. They were on the side of the property, hidden in overgrown landscaping. He could see the house from here, see lights moving inside. Flashlights. The men searching, at least 8 of them visible. Maybe more he couldn't see. The others emerged behind him one by one. David's face was streaked with dirt and blood from scraping through tight spaces. Elena looked terrified but determined. Sarah immediately took her gun back, checked the surroundings with professional efficiency. "We need to get off this property," she whispered. "Get somewhere public, somewhere with witnesses." Marcus nodded, but as he started to move, lights flashed across them. A vehicle was coming up the driveway. For a moment, Marcus thought it was more of Voss's men. Then he heard the sound that made his heart leap. Sirens. Police. 3 LAPD cruisers coming up the winding driveway, lights flashing red and blue through the overgrown trees. "I called them before we went into the vent," Sarah said with a tight smile. "Told them we heard intruders, breaking and entering in progress." The cruisers stopped in the circular driveway. Officers emerged, hands on their weapons. Inside the house, Marcus could see flashlights going out, men moving quickly. They'd be running, trying to escape before the police got inside. One figure appeared on the front steps. Raymond Voss, silver hair immaculate even now, suit perfect. He raised his hands slowly, calling out to the officers in a calm, reasonable voice. "Officers, thank God you're here. I'm Raymond Voss, attorney at law. I represent the previous owner of this property. We're here investigating a break-in. Someone's been trespassing." "That would be me," Marcus said, stepping out of the bushes. His clothes were torn, his hands were bleeding, his leg was barely supporting his weight, but he walked toward the police officers with his head held high. "I'm Marcus Riley. I own this property. Bought it at auction 3 days ago. Mr. Voss and his associates broke into my home tonight, threatened me, tried to force me to give them access to a secure room on the property." The officers looked between them, confused. Voss maintained his calm demeanor, but Marcus could see the calculation in his eyes. The lawyer was trying to figure out how to spin this, how to make Marcus look like the criminal. "Officers," Voss said smoothly. "Mr. Riley is confused. He's only recently purchased this property and doesn't understand its complicated legal history. There are some valuable items here that belong to my client. We were simply attempting to—" "There's $260 million hidden in a panic room beneath the library," Marcus interrupted. Laundered money that Mr. Voss was moving for criminal organizations. Tom Cruise discovered what was happening and took the money as insurance. That's why he abandoned this house. That's why Voss has been watching it for 8 years. And tonight, when I got too close to finding it, he broke in with 8 armed men to recover it. The officers were staring now. One of them was speaking into his radio, calling for backup. Another had his hand on his weapon, looking at Voss with new suspicion. "That's a very creative story," Voss said, but his voice had lost its smoothness. "I think Mr. Riley is suffering from delusions, perhaps PTSD. I understand he's a veteran with medical issues." "I have video evidence," Marcus said. "Photos of the money, photos of documents showing money laundering, Tom Cruise's personal journal detailing everything Voss did to trap him. I've uploaded it all to secure servers. Even if you kill me, even if you destroy the physical evidence, digital copies exist. Copies that will be released to every news organization in America if anything happens to me or my friends." Voss's mask finally slipped. For just a moment, Marcus saw rage flash across his face. Pure, murderous rage. Then it was gone, replaced by the smooth attorney persona. But the officers had seen it too. "Sir," one of the officers said to Voss, "I'm going to need you to step over here. We need to ask you some questions." As more police vehicles arrived, as the situation shifted from a simple trespassing call to something much bigger, Marcus felt the adrenaline finally draining from his body. He sat down hard on the front steps, his leg giving out completely. Elena sat beside him, put her arm around his shoulders. "You did it," she whispered. "You actually did it." Marcus wasn't sure what he'd done, wasn't sure if he'd saved himself or destroyed himself, but he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He'd made a choice. Not to run like Tom Cruise had, not to hide, but to fight. To stand his ground and risk everything because some things were worth fighting for. Even if he had no idea what came next. Even if the next chapter of this nightmare was just beginning. The FBI arrived at dawn. Marcus had spent the night in the back of an ambulance, medics cleaning his bloodied hands and checking his leg while police swarmed the mansion. Raymond Voss had been taken away in handcuffs, still maintaining his smooth composure, still insisting this was all a misunderstanding. 6 of his associates had been arrested trying to flee through the overgrown grounds. 2 more had vanished into the Hollywood Hills before police could secure the perimeter. Special Agent Jennifer Wu stepped out of a black SUV as the sun crested the eastern hills, painting the mansion gold. She was mid-40s, wearing a sharp suit and an expression that suggested she'd seen everything twice and wasn't impressed by any of it. She found Marcus sitting on the terrace steps, watching the sunrise over Los Angeles, Elena beside him holding 2 cups of coffee she'd somehow acquired from one of the officers. "Mr. Riley," Agent Wu said, "I'm told you have quite a story for me." Marcus looked up at her. He was exhausted. His leg throbbed, his hands were bandaged, but his mind was clear, clearer than it had been in 3 years. "I have evidence of a $260 million money laundering operation, evidence that implicates powerful people, evidence that's been sitting in a panic room beneath this house for 8 years. Agent Wu's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Interest. "Show me." They descended into the panic room, Wu bringing 3 other agents with her. Marcus watched their faces as the LED lights flickered on, as they saw the shelves of cash, the gold bars, the bearer bonds. Saw their professional masks slip for just a moment as the sheer scope of what they were looking at registered. Agent Wu picked up Tom Cruise's journal, read the first few pages, then looked at Marcus with new respect. "You found this 2 days ago?" "Last night. Opened the panic room around 3 in the morning. "And you didn't take anything? Didn't try to hide any of it?" Marcus shook his head. "Wouldn't know where to start. Besides, this isn't my money. Never was." Wu nodded slowly. Over the next 6 hours, her team photographed and cataloged everything. The cash took 3 agents 2 hours just to inventory. The final count was staggering: $97 million in $100 bills, $38 million in gold bars, $23 million in bearer bonds, and cryptocurrency keys that, once accessed, revealed another $109 million in various digital currencies. $267,400,000, Wu announced in the library as her team finished. Give or take a few $100,000. Mr. Riley, you've just handed us the largest financial evidence seizure in Los Angeles history. Marcus sat at the library desk, the same desk where Tom Cruise had written his confession. What happens now? Now? Wu pulled up a chair, sat across from him like they were old friends having coffee. Now you tell me what you want. What I want? You found this evidence. You preserved it. You risked your life to protect it. And most importantly, you didn't try to keep it. That matters. So before we start the official interviews, before the lawyers get involved, tell me what you want out of this. Marcus thought about Vincent the loan shark waiting for his money, thought about his cramped studio apartment in Reseda, thought about his mother working 2 jobs, thought about all the veterans he knew who were barely surviving, drowning in a system that had forgotten them the moment they took off their uniforms. I want to use it to help people, he said quietly. Veterans, injured service members who came home broken and got left behind. I want to create something that actually works, not more VA promises, not more bureaucracy, real help, housing, jobs, therapy, purpose. Wu was quiet for a long moment. The money is evidence in a federal case. Technically, it should be seized. I know, but, she leaned forward, there's something called equitable distribution in cases like this. If the criminal funds are recovered and there's no way to return them to legitimate owners, sometimes the courts allow them to be used for public good, especially if the person who recovered them has a compelling case for how they'll be used. Marcus's heart started to pound. You're saying it's possible? I'm saying if you can make a case to a federal judge that this money will do more good helping veterans than sitting in an evidence locker for 10 years, you might have a shot. But you'll need lawyers, good ones, and you'll need a solid plan, not just dreams, actual structure, foundation, oversight, accountability. She stood up. Think about it. We'll start the official process tomorrow. For now, get some rest. You look like you've been through a war. Been through several, Marcus said. This is just the latest one. Wu smiled for the first time. Yeah, I can see that. The next 3 months were a blur of lawyers, court hearings, and media attention Marcus never wanted. The story broke within 48 hours. Injured veteran discovers fortune in Tom Cruise's abandoned mansion. Every news outlet in America ran some version of it. The photos of the panic room went viral. Tom Cruise's journal entries were leaked and became a national scandal. Raymond Voss was indicted on 17 counts of money laundering, conspiracy, and racketeering. The investigation spread, ensnaring 2 senators, a federal judge, and the CEOs of 3 major corporations. It was the biggest financial crime case in a decade, and Marcus Riley, broke mechanic with PTSD, sat at the center of it all. Tom Cruise himself finally broke his silence 6 weeks after Marcus's discovery. He released a statement through his publicist, a carefully worded acknowledgement that he'd been deceived by business partners and had made errors in judgment, but was relieved the truth had come to light. He praised Marcus for his courage and announced he was establishing a legal defense fund to support the prosecution of those involved. Marcus didn't hear from Cruise directly until 3 months after that first night. He was standing in the mansion's library, now cleaned and restored, meeting with architects about converting the space when his phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Riley, this is Tom. A pause. Tom Cruise, I hope you don't mind me calling. Marcus sat down hard in one of the reading chairs. No, of course not. I wanted to thank you, in person, if possible, for doing what I couldn't, for being brave enough to face what I ran from. They met 2 days later at a quiet restaurant in Malibu. Tom Cruise walked in wearing jeans and a baseball cap, trying to be invisible, but head still turned. He sat across from Marcus in a booth at the back, and for the first time, Marcus saw him not as a movie star, but as a man who'd been carrying a terrible weight for 8 years. "I read what you're planning to do with the money," Tom said. "The foundation, the Veterans Center, it's incredible." "It's what it should have been used for all along," Marcus replied, "not hidden away in the dark." Tom looked down at his hands. "I was a coward. I knew that money was dirty. Knew people had been hurt to earn it. And I just hid it and ran. Told myself I was protecting my family, but really, I was just scared." "You were trapped," Marcus said. "Voss threatened you, threatened your kids. What were you supposed to do?" "What you did. Stand up, fight, go to the authorities. Instead, I hid for 8 years. Tom met his eyes. "But you're giving me a chance to make it right. The foundation. Let me help. I want to donate. I want to be part of what you're building." Marcus thought about saying no, about keeping Tom Cruise's tainted involvement away from something good. But then he realized that was Tom's punishment, living with what he'd done, trying to redeem himself, knowing he could never fully make up for his cowardice. And maybe that was okay. Maybe redemption wasn't about erasing mistakes, but about choosing to do better afterward. "50 million, Marcus said. "Donate 50 million to the foundation, clean money from your own accounts. That would help a lot." Tom didn't hesitate. "Done. And I'll do more. Public service announcements, fundraising, whatever you need." They shook hands across the table, and Marcus saw tears in the movie star's eyes. The legal resolution came faster than anyone expected. A federal judge, impressed by Marcus's refusal to profit personally and moved by testimony from dozens of veterans about the need for better support, made a landmark ruling. The $267 million would be placed in a trust, managed by an independent board, with Marcus as founding director. Every penny would be accounted for, every expenditure audited, but it would be used for its intended purpose, healing those who'd sacrificed for their country. Raymond Voss was sentenced to 35 years in federal prison. Most of his associates received similar sentences. The investigation continued, reaching into corners of power Marcus had never known existed. But that wasn't his concern anymore. His concern was building something that mattered. The Warriors Haven Foundation opened its doors 18 months after Marcus had bought the mansion for $73,000. The mansion itself became the flagship facility, transformed from Tom Cruise's monument to fear into something beautiful and purposeful. The panic room was left intact as a reminder, but the rest of the house was completely renovated. The 30 rooms became a mix of offices, counseling centers, meeting spaces, and temporary housing for veterans in crisis. The home theater became a space for group therapy and community gatherings. The gym was upgraded with equipment designed for injured service members. The pool was repaired and reopened, used for aquatic therapy. The grounds were cleared and landscaped, transformed into meditation gardens and walking paths where veterans could find peace. But the foundation was more than just the mansion. With careful management of the $267 million, Marcus and his team opened 12 satellite facilities across America. Each one offered a full spectrum of services: housing assistance for homeless veterans, job training and placement, mental health counseling, physical therapy, financial planning, legal aid, and most importantly, community. A place where veterans could find others who understood, who'd lived through similar hell, who wouldn't judge the nightmares or the panic attacks or the days when getting out of bed felt impossible. Marcus hired David Martinez as the foundation's chief operating officer. Elena Vasquez became the director of outreach and documentation, telling the stories of the veterans they helped. Sarah Morrison ran security and also developed a program teaching security skills to veterans looking for careers in that field. They brought in others too, therapists who specialized in PTSD, job counselors who understood military culture, financial advisors who knew how to help someone transition from a military salary to civilian pay. And they hired veterans for everything they could: maintenance, administration, counseling, security. Every position where a veteran could do the job, a veteran got the job. The foundation became not just a place that helped veterans, but a place run by veterans, for veterans, creating a cycle of employment and purpose that rippled outward. By the end of the first year, they directly helped 437 veterans, housed 83 who'd been homeless, placed 216 in jobs, prevented at least 12 suicides that Marcus knew about, probably more he didn't. The numbers grew every month as word spread, as desperate veterans heard there was a place that actually cared, that actually delivered on its promises. Marcus still lived on the property, in a small apartment he'd created in what used to be the servants' quarters. He didn't want a big house, didn't need luxury. What he needed was to be close to the work, to be available when a veteran in crisis showed up at 3 a.m, to be present for every victory and every setback. His mother moved into a guest house on the property, finally retired, spending her days volunteering in the foundation's community garden that she'd helped design. The transformation wasn't just in the facilities or the programs, it was in Marcus himself. The panic attacks became less frequent. The nightmares faded, though they never fully disappeared. His legs still hurt, probably always would, but he'd made peace with it. The pain was a reminder that he'd survived, that he'd fought and lost something but gained something else. Purpose, direction, a reason to wake up every morning that wasn't just survival. He stood in the library one evening, almost exactly 2 years after he'd bought the mansion, looking at the wall they'd created. The memorial wall, they called it. Framed photos of veterans who'd come through the foundation, each one with a brief story. John, formerly homeless, now managing a warehouse in Sacramento. Lisa, Navy veteran with PTSD, now a peer counselor helping others. Rashid, Army Ranger who'd lost both legs, now a motivational speaker and adaptive sports instructor. Dozens of photos, dozens of lives changed, and more being added every week. Elena found him there, standing in front of the wall, tears running down his face. She didn't say anything, just stood beside him, her hand finding his. "I was thinking about that first night," Marcus said quietly. "When I slept in this room with a tire iron, terrified of what was behind that door. If someone had told me then what it would lead to, I wouldn't have believed them." "Would you have still opened it?" Elena asked. "If you'd known how hard it would be? The legal battles, the media attention, the threats from Voss's associates?" Marcus thought about that. Really thought. "Yeah," he said finally. "Because the alternative was walking away, letting fear win. And I'd done that for 3 years after I got injured. Let fear run my life. Let it tell me I was broken and useless and had nothing left to give. Opening that door wasn't just about finding money. It was about refusing to be afraid anymore." Elena squeezed his hand. "You saved a lot of people, Marcus. You know that, right? We saved them, all of us. This isn't just me." "No, but it started with you. One injured veteran who decided to fight instead of run." The foundation's 2nd anniversary celebration was held on the mansion's front lawn, which had been transformed from an overgrown jungle into a beautiful park-like setting. Over 2,000 people attended, veterans the foundation had helped, donors, volunteers, local officials, and media covering what had become one of the most successful veteran support organizations in the country. Marcus stood at the podium, looking out at the crowd, feeling the weight of their hopes and expectations. He'd never been good at public speaking, still got nervous, still felt his hands shake slightly. But he'd learned that courage wasn't about not being afraid, it was about acting despite the fear. 2 years ago," he began, I was living in a studio apartment in Reseda. I was broke, struggling, couldn't hold down a job, spent most days wondering what the point was, why I'd survived when better men had died, what I was supposed to do with a life that felt like it was already over. He paused, gathering his thoughts. Then I took a crazy risk. Bet everything I had on an abandoned mansion nobody wanted, and I found something in that house. Not just money. I found a choice. I could walk away like the previous owner had, could run from the danger, could let fear control me, or I could stand my ground and fight for something that mattered. He gestured to the crowd. Every person here represents that same choice. Every veteran who walks through our doors is making a choice to fight instead of quit, to reach out instead of isolate, to believe their life still has purpose even when the world's told them they're broken. His voice grew stronger. The money that funds this foundation was hidden in darkness for 8 years, money that came from terrible places, from criminals and traffickers, blood money. But we've transformed it. Every dollar that was earned through cruelty is now being used to heal. Every cent that represented someone's pain is now creating someone's hope. And that's the power we all have. The power to take the worst things in our lives and transform them into something meaningful. He looked directly at a group of veterans sitting in the front row, recent arrivals to the program, still rough around the edges, still carrying the weight. You're not broken. You're not useless. You're not a burden. You're warriors who fought for something bigger than yourselves, and you deserve a country that fights just as hard for you. This foundation exists to be that fight, to be the support you earned, and we'll be here as long as veterans need us. That's a promise. The applause was thunderous. Marcus stepped away from the microphone, his leg aching from standing so long, but his heart full in a way he'd never experienced before. David caught him as he descended from the platform, steadied him. "Hell of a speech," David said. "Meant every word." Tom Cruise appeared through the crowd, still trying to be inconspicuous but failing. He'd become a regular presence at the foundation, volunteering quietly, often showing up unannounced to help with whatever needed doing. He'd kept his word about the $50 million donation and had given more since then. "Marcus," Tom said, pulling him aside, "there's someone who wants to meet you." He led Marcus through the crowd to where an older man stood, mid-70s, wearing a Vietnam veteran's baseball cap and a windbreaker despite the warm evening. Tom made the introduction. "Marcus Riley, this is Colonel Robert Henderson. He's with the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. He's the one who ultimately approved your foundation getting the funds." Marcus shook the colonel's hand, surprised by the firm grip. "Sir, I never got to thank you properly for believing in what we wanted to do." Henderson smiled. "I was a Marine, Vietnam. Came home in '73 and nobody gave a damn. No programs, no support, just a bus ticket and a pat on the back. Spent years angry about that. So when your case came across my desk, when I saw what you wanted to build, I made damn sure it happened." He looked around at the crowd, at the veterans laughing and talking, at the life and energy filling the space. "You've done something remarkable here, given people their dignity back. That's worth more than any amount of money." "It's what they deserve," Marcus said simply. "Yes, it is." Henderson pulled an envelope from his jacket. "Which is why I wanted to give you this personally. The investigation into Voss's organization is complete. We've recovered an additional $73 million in assets from accounts we didn't know existed. The court has ruled it should be added to your foundation's trust. Bring your total to $340 million. Marcus stared at the envelope, barely able to process what he was hearing. $340 million. Resources to expand even further, to help even more veterans, to build something that would last generations. "Sir, I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything. Just keep doing what you're doing. Keep fighting for the people everyone else forgot." Henderson saluted, crisp and formal despite his age. "Semper Fi, son." Marcus returned the salute, something he hadn't done in 3 years. It felt right. It felt like coming home. As the celebration continued into the evening, Marcus found himself back in the library. The panic room door stood open now, lights on, the space transformed into an archive and museum. They'd left some of the original evidence as historical record, but most of it had been claimed by the FBI for prosecution. The room that had once held secrets and fear now held hope. They used it for orientation sessions, bringing new veterans down to see where everything had started, to understand that transformation was possible. Marcus descended the stairs slowly, his leg cooperating for once. At the bottom, he found a young veteran sitting on the floor, head in his hands. The kid couldn't have been more than 25, wearing a Marines shirt, fresh scars on his arms, the look of someone barely holding it together. "You okay?" Marcus asked, sitting down beside him despite the protest from his leg. The kid looked up, startled. "Sorry, I just needed a minute. Got overwhelmed up there. Too many people." "I get that. I really do." Marcus extended his hand. "Marcus Riley. I run this place." "I know who you are. Everyone knows who you are." The kid shook his hand. "I'm James Cooper. Got here 2 days ago. Still not sure if I belong." "You belong," Marcus said firmly. "If you're here, you belong." "What branch?" "Marines. Infantry. 2 tours. Afghanistan. Got hit by an IED last year. Lost my hearing in one ear. Got some brain damage. Memory problems. They discharged me and sent me home, and my girlfriend left because I wasn't the same person anymore." The words tumbled out fast, like he'd been holding them in. "I couldn't keep a job. Started drinking. My family stopped calling because I was too much work. I was living in my car last week when someone told me about this place." Marcus put his hand on the kid's shoulder. "I know exactly how that feels. 3 years ago I was you, injured, broken, living in a crappy apartment, wondering why I bothered surviving. Then I took a crazy risk and found this place, found a purpose, and it saved me." "How?" James asked, his voice breaking. "How do you come back from feeling like you're already dead?" "One day at a time, one choice at a time, choosing to ask for help instead of suffering alone, choosing to believe you're worth saving even when you don't feel like it, choosing to stay one more day." Marcus stood, offered his hand to pull James up. "Come on, let me show you something." He led James back upstairs to the memorial wall. Found a blank frame waiting to be filled. "In a year, maybe 2, your photo is going to be up here, and underneath it, we're going to write your story. Not about how you got injured, not about the hard times, about what you did after, how you chose to fight, how you helped others, how you transformed your pain into purpose." James stared at the blank frame, tears streaming down his face. "You really think I can do that?" "I know you can, because I did it, and I'm no one special. Just a mechanic with a bum leg who got lucky. If I can turn my life around, you sure as hell can too." They stood there together, veteran and veteran, survivor and survivor, looking at a wall full of proof that redemption was possible, that broken didn't mean finished, that the darkest moments could lead to the brightest transformations. Marcus thought about the path that had led him here, the IED blast that had stolen his leg and his confidence, the years of struggling and failing, the desperate bid on an abandoned mansion, the terror of opening that panic room door, the fortune hidden in darkness, the choice to fight instead of run. Every step had been necessary. Every moment of pain had purpose. He'd thought finding $260 million would change his life, and it had, but not the way he'd expected. The money had given him resources, yes, but what had really changed him was the decision to use those resources for something bigger than himself. To transform blood money into healing. to take what had been hidden in shame and bring it into light, to prove that no matter how dark your past, no matter how broken you felt, redemption was possible if you were brave enough to reach for it. 3 years after buying the mansion, Marcus stood on the terrace watching the sunset paint the Hollywood Hills gold and purple. The Warriors Haven Foundation was now helping over 5,000 veterans annually. They'd opened 23 facilities across America. They'd created jobs for hundreds of veterans. They'd saved countless lives, and they were just getting started. Elena joined him, as she often did in the evenings. They'd become more than colleagues over the years, more than friends. She'd been there through the worst of it and had chosen to stay through the best of it. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. Tom Cruise, Marcus admitted. How he lived in fear for 8 years. How he let that fear consume him. And how different my life could have been if I'd made the same choice. If I'd walked away when Voss's man offered me $5 million to forget everything. "But you didn't walk away." "No, I didn't. And now—" He gestured to the mansion behind them, warm light spilling from every window, veterans inside finding hope and healing. "Now something good exists that wouldn't have if I'd been a coward." "You were never going to be a coward," Elena said. "That's not who you are. Soldiers don't run from fights. They run toward them." Marcus smiled. "Even when they're terrified?" "Especially then. That's what courage is." They stood in comfortable silence as the last light faded from the sky and stars began to appear overhead. Marcus thought about all the veterans who would sleep safely tonight because of the foundation, all the families who'd been reunited, all the jobs created, all the lives saved, all the hope restored. He thought about the young Marine, James, who'd been sitting broken in the panic room just hours ago. In a year, James would be thriving, would probably be helping other veterans, passing forward the grace he'd received. That was the real miracle of this place. Not the money, not the facilities, but the way healing rippled outward, each saved veteran becoming someone who could save others. Anyone can run when they're scared if they let fear make their decisions. But sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stand your ground, face the unknown, and transform your darkest moment into someone else's greatest hope. Marcus Riley had walked into an abandoned mansion looking for a fresh start. What he'd found instead was a fortune built on cruelty, a secret that powerful men had killed to protect, and a choice that would define the rest of his life. He'd chosen courage over comfort, purpose over profit, service over self. And in doing so, the broken veteran who'd thought his life was over had discovered something profound. Healing others was how you healed yourself. Standing up for those who couldn't stand was how you found the strength to keep standing. And sometimes the worst things that happen to you are preparing you for the best things you'll ever do. The mansion that had been Tom Cruise's monument to fear had become Marcus Riley's monument to hope. The money that had been hidden in darkness for 8 years now shone bright, touching lives across America, proving that redemption wasn't just possible, it was inevitable for those brave enough to reach for it. Because at the end of the day, it wasn't about the $260 million. It was never about the money. It was about a choice to fight instead of run, to heal instead of hide, to transform pain into purpose and darkness into light. And for Marcus Riley and the thousands of veterans whose lives he'd changed, that choice made all the difference. The end. Up next, 2 more powerful stories of courage, redemption, and second chances are waiting for you. Click to discover more incredible true stories, and don't forget to hit subscribe if you believe that sometimes the most broken among us become the strongest, and that every ending can be a new beginning if we're brave enough to write it.